When you open up the Arduino software, you're presented with a blank sketch, like this one here. The sketch is essentially where you write your program to control the Arduino. If you go to File and then Examples, you'll see a whole series of example segments of code or example sketches which demonstrate how to do a whole bunch of different functions, from basic things like flashing an LED on and off to writing to various control mechanisms like motor controllers, or reading from sensors, or even controlling an LCD screen, for example. In this video we'll demonstrate a basic sketch which flashes an LED on and off. To do this, go to File, Examples, Basics and Blink. This will open up a new window, and this new window contains all the code for this basic blink function. Firstly, you'll see two different things. There's all this code or text that's in grey. All this text starts with either the slash and the star or a double slash before it. This text is what we call comments. Now, the computer doesn't actually recognize it at all. It doesn't transform into code at all and control anything. It's for the programmer's benefit and lets the programmer make notes to himself about what's going on. All the other things are actual code, and we'll have a look at this code briefly. Now, the purpose of this code is to flash an LED on and flash an LED off, and do so at a rate of about 1 second on, 1 second off. The first thing we see here is the pin number that the LED is connected to. Let's change that and say we're going to connect the LED to pin 5 on our Arduino board. So that will now be set to pin 5. The first function that we deal with is the setup function. The setup function runs once when the Arduino first runs, and it basically initializes or sets up a whole bunch of things we need. So some of the things that we need to set up are whether particular pins are going to be set to be inputs, for example if we're reading a switch value, or an output, for example if we're trying to set an LED to turn on or off. We can also set up other things in here like switching the LCD screen on and controlling it. This command in the setup function, Pinmode, allows us to set up a particular pin, in this case the pin that the LED is connected to from up here, to be an output. And because it's an output, it will allow us to drive or control an LED. The next thing we have is the loop function. Now, the setup function runs once and only once. The loop function runs continuously. It loops and loops forever. In the loop function, what we're doing is we're writing some code to set the pin high that the LED's connected to. This will actually turn the LED off based on the way that we've connected the LED up to the Arduino. It mentions turning it on in the comments. The comments correspond to connecting the LED up a different way than what we're teaching you in this class. We then delay for 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. We then turn the LED on, so we make that pin go low and turn the LED on, delay for 1000 milliseconds and loop around again. If we didn't have those two delays in there, it would still flash, but it would be flashing at 16 million times per second, and it's just a lot faster than what we can actually see, and so we wouldn't actually see it flashing. Well, that's the basics of our first program. Now we need to actually make that program run on our Arduino software. So first thing we need to do is go to Tools and make sure we select as our board the Arduino Uno board. The next thing that we need to do is select the correct serial port. And the way we do this is, without the Arduino plugged in, go to serial port and make a note of what serial ports are available. Then you can plug the Arduino in and now make a note of what serial ports are available. And you'll see a new serial port that's added there. That new one is the serial port that corresponds to our particular Arduino device. We can then click the Upload button. The Upload button will compile the code. Any errors in the code will be displayed down here in red, and it's done uploading. Now we can have a look at the actual device, and we should see the LED flashing on and off if we've connected our circuit up correctly. Here we see the LED flashing on and off. It's on for 1 second and off for 1 second, exactly as we programmed it to do. Here's the basic circuit that we use to connect up an LED to the Arduino. You'll notice we use a resistor in there. That's a current limiting resistor. That current limiting resistor limits the current that goes to the LED. In this case, anything from 300 to 500 ohms will work okay. Up the top we have VCC. We connect that directly to the 5-volt pin on the Arduino to supply power to turn on and off the LED. Down the bottom we have the LED. We have the longer leg facing towards the resistor and the shorter leg facing towards pin 5, the digital pin on the Arduino.
Now let's look in a little more detail at two of the functions that we used in that last example. Firstly, we have the Pinmode function. Now before we can use a pin, we need to set up the pin or specify the mode of the pin. Essentially we have two different modes. Is this pin going to be a digital output, or is this pin going to be a digital input? Now normally we do all these Pinmode assignments in the setup function, and they're very straightforward and simple. We need to specify as the first argument of this function the pin number, so we can specify pin 10 or 11 for example, or we'd normally have some pin assignments that we write at the top of the page like we did in the previous example. This allows us to refer to these different pins by English names that actually make sense to us rather than having to remember a particular number. And then we specify whether they're an input or an output. So things that we're controlling like LEDs are always outputs. Things that we're reading like switches are going to be inputs. And so in the previous example we used our LED, we're flashing an LED, so we set that particular LED to an output. So that's the Pinmode function. Now we need to do that for each particular pin that we're using on our Arduino. The other one we had was the digital write function. And the digital write function allows us to actually set the voltage to be a high or a low for a pin that we've set up as an output. So this is only valid for outputs. If we set it to a high, it'll set the voltage on that particular pin to be 5 volts. If we set it to a low, it'll set the voltage on that particular pin to be 0 volts. And this one works similar to our Pinmode function before. Our first argument, we specify the pin number, and we can specify that via a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it happens to be, or we can specify it via a variable that we've tied to a particular pin like LED pin 1. We then specify high or low, which is going to set it to 5 volts or 0 volts. Alternately, if we don't want to say high or low, we can set it to 1 or a 0, where 0 is low and 1 is high, and it will have exactly the same behavior.